In order for the object to follow along with the character, we need to attach it to the character's body, and it can be done to any part of the body. We'll first start with the simplest constraint system and attach the object to one of our character hands. Here on the first frame, I've already posed my character in advance, so we can save some time and just focus on the constraint system itself. You can create any pose you like. The most important thing in this lesson is to understand how to make our character hold an object so that when the character moves his hand, an object moves with it. In my example, the character is supposed to be holding a sword in his right arm and carefully walking towards something. Let's display the sword. We've turned off the selectability option for the mesh before, so let's turn it on for now so that we can select our sword. If we select the sword, we can see that its manipulator is currently set in the center of the sword. But if we want to be able to properly move the sword with the hand as a character would normally do, we need to move the manipulator down towards the handle. That way the sword will move and rotate from that spot. We can move the manipulator by hitting the D key on our keyboard, which will then let us bring the pivot point down, somewhere in the middle of the sword handle. When you're done positioning the pivot point, hit the D again to bring back the normal manipulator and exit from the editing mode. If we try to rotate the sword now, you can see that it rotates from this spot. Okay, we can move on to setting up the constraint system. While we animate, we don't want to have any keys on the mesh itself, and the best way to avoid that is to create the NURBS curves controls for the mesh, which will let us manipulate the object. So now we're going to create them ourselves. Let's go to Create, NURBS Primitives, Circle. And here in the center of our scene, we've created a NURBS curve circle, which we will use to control our sword. Now, in order to position the circle right in the middle of our handle, we need to first select the sword, then the circle which we created, and the order of selection really matters. Then, with the objects being selected, go to Constraint, Parent, and select this option box to open up the Parent Constraint menu. Here, we want to deselect the Maintain Offset option and then click Apply. Now, because we turned off the Maintain Offset option, our circle has snapped to where the pivot point of the sword was, and that is the easiest and quickest way of centering something around another object. For now, we only wanted to center the circle around the handle, but we didn't need to constrain it to the sword, so we need to go back to the Constrain menu, with our objects still being selected, and here you need to select Remove Target. Now our NURB circle is no longer constrained, and you can make sure of that by looking at the channel box. Here we no longer have any channels marked with blue, which we did before. The blue color on the channels mark the constraints. Since our object has no longer any constraints on it, we can move ahead to our next step, which is actually to constrain the objects again, but this time we'll do it a little bit differently. We want our sword mesh to be constrained to the NURB circle, and the easiest way to do that is to go to the outliner, select the sword mesh, and with middle mouse button, drag it on top of the NURB circle. That way, the NURB circle becomes the parent of the sword mesh. And if we select the NURB circle now and move it, our sword moves together with it. All right, we have one final thing left to do. We have the sword ready. Now we need to attach its system to our hand, so that the hand will be able to control the sword. First, we need to position the sword in our hand, and the quickest way to do that would be to do a similar thing to what we did when we centered the NURB circle around the sword. First, select the hand control, then the sword control, and go to Constrain, Parent, keep the Maintain Offset option turned off, and hit Apply. Our sword has snapped to the hand in a way so that its pivot point would be centered on the wrist. We only need to rotate this sword to the other side. And we also need to remove the constraint because we only wanted to position the sword. So let's go to Constraint and remove the target. Now we can reposition the sword more accurately. Select the NURB circle which we've created. We can actually rename it to sword_offset so that we know what we're working with. And now just rotate it and position it to where you want it to be placed in the hand. We don't actually want our sword to be centered on the wrist. It was just a quick way of bringing the sword closer to where it was supposed to be placed. So now we just need to do small adjustments. Okay, something like this will work fine. Now that we're happy with the position of our sword in the hand, we can constrain it to the hand control. We don't want to constrain the sword offset control itself because we need it to be available for saving the keys of our animation. So we need its channel box to be clean. What we can do is select the sword offset in the outliner and create a group by hitting the Ctrl and G. If we expand the group, we can see that we still have our NURBS curve circle or sword offset there, and then inside the circle we have our sword mesh. Let's rename the group to Sword Main. And once we've made the group, select the hand control first, then select the group by holding down Ctrl. Go to Constraint, Parent, and this time select the Maintain Offset box so that after we apply the constraint, the sword would stay in the place where it was positioned. Hit Apply and close the menu. If we move the arm now, our sword stays in its place in the hand. It doesn't matter how we move the arm, the sword moves with it. When animating, if we move the entire character, the upper body, the arms, add some overlap, make our character look flexible, but the sword always remains the same way placed in the hand, it could seem as if it is glued to the hand, which will look stiff and unnatural. That's why we have created this NURB circle control for our sword at the beginning, and we've named it Sword Offset for that same reason. If we need to add flexibility to the sword, we have the option to animate it separately and add some overlap to it. I'll turn off the Mesh Selectability option now and quickly demonstrate how we can use the Sword Offset control. I'll select all the controls and create two poses on frames 7 and 10. And just for the purpose of quickly showing you how you can offset the sword, I will move the arm down in 3 frames. Then I will select the sword control and rotate it. So now when the arm is going down, our sword changes its angle in the hand as well. If I delete the key that I've created on the sword offset control, you can see the initial sword position that it had before I made any changes, and it would have stayed in this angle if I hadn't animated the offset control. So that's why it's good to have the option of animating the sword independently as well. That was the first system of constraints. In the upcoming lesson, I will show you the other type of constraint system.